Cold country survival. Building a snow cave shelter. Norman's lesson. It was a routine day on the line. Norman had traveled this stretch many times that winter, following a narrow, familiar trail that wound out from the Glen Highway and into the quiet interior. Black spruce stood thin and scattered, their branches burdened with frost, the land rolling gently beneath a pale and distant sun. At 40 below, routine is a kind of protection. The snow machine had been running unevenly since morning. A hesitation in the throttle. A note in the engine just slightly off. Not enough to turn back, but enough to notice. In cold like this, small warnings matter. The failure came without ceremony. A sputter, a hollow whine, then stillness. The sudden silence spread outward into the trees, into the snow, into the long distance beyond. Norman remained seated for a moment, hands resting on the grips, his breath slow behind the mask. There is no advantage in rushing the next decision. He looked at the sky, flat, colorless, already drifting toward afternoon. Then the trail behind him, and ahead. There was no shelter here, no cabin, no dense stand of timber that might quickly be shaped into something livable. At 40 below, distance is measured differently. You do not go looking for better ground. You make it. Norman stepped down from the machine. The cold rose immediately through his boots, firm and unyielding. Time, now, was the one resource already in short supply. This was no longer a matter of travel. It was a matter of shelter. Site selection. The first step in building a snow cave is choosing where to dig. The landscape may appear uniform, white, level, endless, but the quality of snow varies greatly from place to place. Norman moved off the trail perhaps 30 yards into a loose stand of spruce. Not dense forest, but enough to break the wind and allow snow to gather and settle. Wind matters. Snow that has been shaped and compacted by time will hold its form. Fresh powder will not. Using his shovel, Norman tested the drift. He drove the blade down and felt resistance. Not the soft collapse of loose snow, but the firm give of something bonded. This is what you're looking for. A proper site should have at least 3 to 4 feet of compacted snow. Natural wind protection. Even ground beneath. There are places to avoid. Riverbeds, where hidden overflow can seep upward through the snow. Thin drifts over brush or fallen timber, which create hollow, unstable spaces. Exposed ridges, where wind strips heat and weakens structure. Norman tested once more, then made his decision. Once you begin digging, you commit to that place. Energy spent poorly cannot be recovered. Beginning the entrance. A snow cave begins not with a room, but with a tunnel. Norman marked a narrow opening, no wider than his shoulders, and began to dig straight into the drift. This entrance should extend inward about 3 feet before any widening begins. It serves a purpose beyond access. Cold air is heavier than warm air. It settles into low spaces. By creating a lower tunnel leading into a higher chamber, you allow the coldest air to collect away from where you will rest. This is called a cold sink. It is one of the simplest and most effective principles of winter shelter. Norman worked steadily, not quickly. At 40 below, sweat is dangerous. Moisture trapped in clothing becomes a source of heat lost the moment activity stops. So he paused often, breathing slow, movements controlled. The shovel did most of the work. As the tunnel deepened and narrowed, he used his gloved hands to pull loose snow back and clear the passage behind him. Once the tunnel reached sufficient depth, he began to angle slightly upward. Only then did the cave begin to take shape. Carving the chamber. Inside the drift, Norman began widening the space. This chamber does not need to be large. In fact, it should not be. A snow cave should be only as large as necessary to sit, lie down, and shift position slightly. A smaller volume holds heat more effectively and requires less energy to build. Norman carved a raised platform for sleeping, higher than the entrance tunnel by roughly a foot. This difference in elevation allows warmer air to collect where it is needed most. The shape of the ceiling is equally important. Flat surfaces encourage dripping. As body heat warms the interior, the snow surface softens slightly. Without proper shaping, moisture can gather and fall. Norman curved the ceiling into a gentle dome. This allows any melt to move along the walls instead, preserving dryness in the center. Periodically, he checked the thickness of the roof by pressing upward with the handle of his shovel. A safe thickness is roughly 8 to 12 inches. Thinner areas risk collapse. Too thick, and the cave becomes unnecessarily cold and difficult to ventilate. When the space was complete, he smoothed the interior walls with the back of his glove. This small step reduces drip points and improves the structural integrity of the snow. The cave was simple, but it was enough. Insulation and airflow. A snow cave, properly built, is an effective shelter. But without insulation and ventilation, it can quickly become dangerous. Norman gathered his gear. From the sled, he had only what he carried routinely: a canvas tarp, a bedroll, extra mittens and socks, a small supply of food, matches, a single candle. He began with the ground. Snow will draw heat from the body continuously. Direct contact is to be avoided. The tarp went down first, forming a barrier between the snow and the bedroll. Additional clothing, spare mittens, bundled fabric, was placed beneath key contact points to increase insulation. Even a small separation from the snow makes a difference. Next came ventilation. Norman took a stick and carefully pushed it upward through the roof of the cave, creating a narrow air hole. This must be maintained. A snow cave is nearly airtight. Without ventilation, carbon dioxide can build and oxygen levels can fall. The air hole should be checked regularly, especially after snowfall or drifting wind. Finally, he adjusted the entrance. A partial block, loose snow, or gear placed near the opening helps retain warmth while still allowing airflow. The cave was now ready. The candle. From his pocket, Norman removed the small candle. It was not much. A simple stub carried more from habit than expectation. But in a space like this, even a small flame matters. He lit it carefully, shielding the match from the still air, and set the candle in a shallow depression in the snow. The effect is gradual. A candle will not turn a snow cave into warmth as one might imagine it elsewhere, but it does raise the temperature, often by several degrees. More importantly, it changes the environment from lethal to survivable. Inside a well-built snow cave, even at 40 below, temperatures can rise to just below freezing. That difference between extreme cold and controlled cold is what allows the body to rest. The candle also provides light, a small, steady glow. In the darkness of winter, that too has its value. Night does not arrive suddenly in the interior. It settles, slowly, quietly, as the last pale light withdraws from the sky and the land becomes a study in shadow and stillness. Inside the cave, the world was reduced to essentials: the soft curve of snow walls, the faint glow of flame, the sound of breath. Norman lay back in his bedroll, boots loosened but not removed, hands tucked close for warmth. Outside, the cold continued its steady work, pressing against the small pocket of life he had carved from the drift. There is a particular silence in that kind of cold. Not empty, but full. The kind that carries distance, memory, and a quiet understanding that survival here is never accidental. The candle flickered once, then steadied. A small defiance. A reminder that even in the deepest cold, a measure of warmth can be made if one knows how. Time passed without urgency. In such places, time is not counted in minutes, but in endurance. And through the long interior night, the cave held. Morning and extraction. Morning returned as a faint brightness through the entrance. Norman woke gradually, aware first of the stillness, then of the space around him. The cold had not left, but it had been held at bay. That is the purpose of a snow cave. Not comfort, survival. He checked the air hole, cleared a slight buildup of frost. Then he unsealed the entrance and stepped out into the open. The world beyond remained unchanged. Still cold, still vast. But now there was time again. The machine would need attention: fuel line, belt, something frozen or failed. Repairs in that temperature are slow, deliberate work. But they are possible, and possible is enough. Closing reflection. A snow cave is not a last resort. It is a skill, a method, a way of working with the environment rather than against it. In the North, survival often comes down to understanding simple things done correctly. Where to dig, how to shape, how to conserve heat, how to remain still when stillness is required. Norman did not carry much that day. No excess, no luxury, only what was needed and the knowledge of how to use it. That is the difference. In cold country, preparation is not measured in what you bring, but in what you know. And sometimes, what you know is the only shelter you have. The preceding was a fictionalized account of real events not recorded in Norman's journals.